was 21 weeks pregnant, still riding the exhilarating high of my anatomy scan, when my own sister kicked me. Twice. In the stomach. Just yesterday, I'd been at Lilith's Peak Clinic, watching a miracle unfold on a monitor. My little one, perfectly formed, big, and full of restless energy, tumbling and kicking inside me. Every flutter, every tiny movement, was a promise. A promise of the beautiful life I was building, a loving family far removed from the chaos I'd grown up in. I left that clinic lightheaded with joy, clutching the precious ultrasound photo like it was made of gold. I even taped it right there on the fridge, a beacon of hope and happiness in my small apartment. But that joy, that profound sense of peace, shattered with a single argument. A stupid, petty argument, the kind that ignites between siblings but never truly burns out, because some fires are fed by a deeper, more corrosive fuel. My younger sister, Lyra, was visiting. She's 17, just 2 months shy of 18, and on the cusp of starting her journey to become a doctor at the Sterling Institute. But here's the thing about Lyra, she despises children. Not in a "I prefer a kid-free lifestyle" way, but in a genuinely hateful, venomous way that always chilled me to the bone. She doesn't just dislike them, she actively wishes them ill. It's always been a dark part of her, a shadow she carries, and it always made me wonder, how could someone like that ever work in healthcare? The argument started small, as they always do. Maybe it was about the television, or a perceived slight, or just the simmering tension that always seems to accompany her presence. But then, it escalated. It always did. Lyra, fueled by whatever dark thoughts were swirling in her head, started throwing things. Not just random objects, but things at me. And then she came at me, lunging, her eyes wild with an anger I'd seen too many times before. I reacted instinctively, a primal urge to protect myself and maybe, deep down, to protect the tiny life inside me. She hit me first, a glancing blow to my arm. I hit her back, a desperate, clumsy shove to create distance. That's when the real horror began. She pulled back, her face contorted, screaming words that will forever echo in the darkest corners of my mind. "I hope you and your baby die." And with each hateful syllable, she delivered a blow that stole my breath. I'm 5 feet 9 inches tall. Lyra is 5 feet 2. Her foot, naturally, reaches my leg. But I watched her. I saw the deliberate movement. I saw her cock her foot up, aiming high, her eyes fixed on my growing belly. And she kicked. Not once, but twice. The first impact was a dull thud, a terrifying jolt that sent a jolt of panic through every cell in my body. The second was even worse, a sharper, more deliberate strike that stole the air from my lungs. I crumpled, clutching my stomach, gasping for breath, the world spinning around me. The pain, both physical and emotional, was staggering. But she wasn't done. While I was still on the floor, trying to comprehend what had just happened, trying to reassure myself that my baby was okay, she marched over to the fridge. And with another furious yank, she tore down the ultrasound photo, the one I had placed there with such hope just the day before. She ripped it in half, then crumpled it into a ball and threw it in the trash, her face a mask of pure, unadulterated malice. My mother, who had been witnessing this entire nightmare unfold, finally stepped in. Not to help me, not to comfort me, not to chastise Lyra. No. She defended her. My mother looked at me, lying there, sobbing in pain, and dismissed it all with a wave of her hand. "You're over-exaggerating," she said, her voice flat, devoid of any genuine concern. "She didn't mean to kick you." "Didn't mean to kick me?" I watched her. I saw the calculated aim. I heard the hateful screams. And she tore my baby's first picture off the fridge and threw it out. How could that be anything but intentional? The sheer disbelief was a physical ache. How could my own mother stand there, look at her pregnant daughter, who had just been assaulted by her other child, and minimize it? How could she choose Lyra's convenient denial over my very real pain, my very real terror? I stumbled out of the apartment, the world a blurry mess through my tears. My body was racked with cramps, a chilling reminder of the trauma I'd just endured. My mind raced, consumed by a single, terrifying question: is my baby okay? The hospital was a blur. The sterile smell, the quiet urgency of the nurses, the sympathetic eyes of the doctors. I sat there, curled in on myself, unable to stop crying. The cramps continued, a persistent, dull ache that filled me with dread. But through it all, there was one tiny flicker of hope. No blood. Thank the Creator, no blood. I just couldn't process it. My sister, the aspiring doctor, the one who was supposed to be so smart, so poised, so destined for a brilliant future. She was 17, almost an adult, and she knew exactly what she was doing. She knew the vulnerability of a pregnant woman. She knew the potential consequences of kicking someone in the stomach. And she did it anyway. Not once, but twice. And she wished death upon my baby. My own sister. I sat there, numb and broken, staring at the hospital ceiling, trying to figure out what I was supposed to feel. What I was supposed to do. My world, which had felt so joyful and secure just hours before, had been irrevocably shattered. When my boyfriend, Kale, arrived, his face was etched with worry. He held me tight, stroking my hair as I recounted the horrific events through fresh tears. He was my rock, my anchor in that storm, and just having him there made the unbearable a little less so. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they took me in for another scan. The fear was paralyzing. Every second the technician spent moving the probe, every moment of silence, felt like a lifetime. But then, there it was. A flicker on the screen. A tiny heartbeat, strong and steady. My baby girl, seemingly oblivious to the chaos and hatred that had just erupted in her world, was still there. Still perfect. Still kicking. Everything looks okay, the doctor said, her voice gentle. Thank the Almighty. The relief that washed over me was so profound it almost buckled my knees. My baby was okay. My beautiful daughter, my hope, my future. She was safe. But the physical pain lingered. The cramping persisted, a dull, constant throb that reminded me of Lyra's viciousness. And the emotional pain, that was an entirely different beast. It burrowed deep, leaving a raw, gaping wound. My family has a history of blaming me for everything. Every argument, every problem, every bit of dysfunction, it always circles back to me. So, even in the midst of this horrific assault, a part of me, that ingrained, self-blaming part, started to wonder if I could have prevented it. Maybe I should have just walked away, as so many people later suggested. Maybe I shouldn't have responded when she first came at me. But her words, "I hope you and your baby die," they cut me to the core. They were so hateful, so utterly vile, that I reacted. I never expected her to get violent, not like that. I thought about involving the authorities. What she did was a crime, pure and simple. But then another wave of dread washed over me. I knew my mother. If the police got involved, she would lie for Lyra. She would twist the narrative, make me out to be the aggressor, the instigator. I could end up in trouble. And then there was Lyra's future. The Sterling Institute, the dream of becoming a doctor. If I pressed charges, all of that could be gone. A part of me, despite everything, still wrestled with the idea of ruining her life. But then I'd remember the kicks, the screams, the hatred in her eyes, and the crumpled ultrasound photo. And I'd remember that Lyra doesn't just dislike children, she despises people in general. She has this truly hateful, weird way of looking at the world, always finding fault, always filled with resentment. How could someone like that be trusted with human lives, especially vulnerable ones? It felt fundamentally wrong. I don't live with them anymore. I haven't in years. They were just visiting Viridian City, staying in my apartment for a few days. But even after the hospital, after everything, they were still there. I couldn't face them. I went to Kale's place, and I'm still here, waiting. Waiting for them to pack up their bags, waiting for them to get out of my apartment, out of my life, so I can finally breathe. I know, with absolute certainty, that I cannot have a relationship with Lyra going forward. Not after this. And my relationship with my mother? I don't see much of one for us anytime soon either. The betrayal runs too deep. The pain is too fresh. What would you have done in my shoes? Would you have called the police, knowing the potential consequences for your sister and the complications with your mother? Or would you have tried to protect your baby and yourself first, even if it meant letting your sister get away with it? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. My baby girl, despite everything, was still doing just fine. Her tiny heart kept beating, strong and steady, a defiant rhythm against the chaos. Physically, she was perfectly healthy, a miracle. My cramps did eventually subside, a quiet surrender after days of agonizing discomfort. But my mental health? That was an entirely different story. It felt like a hurricane had ripped through my mind, leaving behind a landscape of emotional rubble. I was shattered, exhausted, constantly on edge. I knew I would be okay eventually, but the path there felt impossibly steep. I spent those first few days at Kale's place, trying to piece myself back together, trying to process the raw, brutal truth of what had happened. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Lyra's contorted face, felt the sickening thud of her kicks. Every time I woke, the fear for my unborn daughter was a lead weight in my chest. I felt a desperate need for distance, for space, for any semblance of control over my own life. I just needed my mother and Lyra to leave, to disappear from Viridian City, to go back to their own lives, far away from mine. And then, the call came. It was my mother. Her voice, usually so sharp and commanding, sounded almost chirpy. As if nothing had happened. As if her younger daughter hadn't just assaulted her pregnant elder daughter, as if she hadn't just defended the indefensible. I braced myself, expecting a forced apology, a grudging acknowledgement of the trauma. What I got instead, what she said next, stopped me cold. "I've made a decision," she announced, her tone dripping with self-importance. "I'm moving to Viridian City." My breath hitched. "What? Why?" I managed, my voice thin, disbelieving. "Well, Lyra needs supervision," she said, as if I hadn't just been the victim of Lyra's violence. "And I think it's time I was closer to you, with the baby coming. Family needs to stick together." My head reeled. Closer to me? Family? Was she serious? After all of it, after the betrayal, the dismissiveness, the outright defense of Lyra's actions, she thought this was a good idea? Then came the kicker. The truly mind-bending, rage-inducing part. "I'll be moving into your little 2-bedroom apartment," she continued, completely oblivious to my stunned silence, "with your baby sister, for the remainder of your lease. You know, until November." My baby sister. Not Lyra, thankfully. My other, much younger sister, who was still just a child herself. But still. My apartment. My small, 2-bedroom apartment where I lived my independent life. The one I shared with no one. The one where I had planned to bring my daughter home. She didn't ask. Not a single question. "No, is this okay? Or what do you think? Or do you have space?" She just told me. She was telling me, her adult daughter, a woman on the cusp of motherhood, how my life was going to go. Because, in her words, which still echo in my nightmares, I'm the parent and I deserve respect. Respect? Respect after she watched her child kick me, kick her grandchild, and then dismissed it as an over-exaggeration? Respect after she tore my ultrasound photo off the fridge and threw it out? The audacity. The sheer, unmitigated gall of it all was breathtaking. I hadn't lived with my mother in 7 years. 7 years of carefully constructed independence. 7 years of living my life exactly how I wanted, making my own rules, finding my own peace. I had built a quiet, stable existence for myself, one where I didn't have to walk on eggshells, where I wasn't constantly on the defensive. That independence was precious to me. It was a shield against the chaos that had always defined my family. And now, with a single, unilateral declaration, she was tearing it all down. The stress of pregnancy was already immense. The morning sickness, the exhaustion, the constant worry for my growing daughter, it was a lot. I had envisioned these remaining months as a time of calm preparation, nesting, bonding with Kale, preparing for the most important role of my life. Instead, she was dumping a fresh load of anxiety and invasion right onto my doorstep. I was pissed. Beyond pissed. I was furious, violated, and utterly helpless. My plan, my carefully considered plan for dealing with this family trauma, had been clear. I was going no contact. A clean break from Lyra, at least for a very long time. And with my mother? I'd hoped for a path back to low contact, a distant, manageable relationship, once the dust settled and the initial wounds began to heal. But now? Now I had no choice in the matter. My apartment, my sanctuary, was about to be invaded. My personal space, my peace, my pregnancy, all of it was suddenly hostage to my mother's whims. It felt like I was being punished. Punished for Lyra's actions, punished for my mother's enabling, punished for simply existing in their orbit. The irony was suffocating. I wanted to scream. I wanted to demand that she respect my boundaries, my right to a peaceful home, my autonomy. But I knew it would be futile. She never listened. She never understood. She only dictated. So, I made my own counterplan. My lease was up in November. As soon as it was, I was moving in with Kale. Period. Full stop. It wasn't a question, it wasn't a negotiation. It was my escape route. My mother, in her delusion, still believed I would be moving in with her when she eventually found a house. She thought she was setting up this grand family reunion, controlling my every move, assuming I would fall right back into line. But she was wrong. So incredibly wrong. I had my own family to build now, and it wouldn't include her brand of toxic control. And Lyra? My crazy little sister, as I now thought of her. What became of her after the incident? Well, she was sent home. Back to their house in another state, away from Viridian City, away from me. Not as a punishment, not really. More like a temporary relocation, because her presence was inconvenient. And her college plans? The Sterling Institute? The dream of becoming a doctor? All gone. Not because my mother finally decided to hold her accountable. Not because her violent outburst made anyone question her suitability for a career in healthcare. No, the reason was far more mundane, far more indicative of the entitled, enabled life she'd always led. A class she wanted to take wasn't offered this semester. That was it. That was the sole, infuriating reason she decided she wasn't going to college. Life wasn't going her way, so she simply opted out. It was a stark, brutal revelation of how deeply ingrained her enabling was. Lyra had never learned to persevere. She'd never faced a genuine setback she couldn't simply walk away from or have smoothed over for her. If things didn't align perfectly with her desires, she crumbled. And my mother, instead of pushing her, instead of teaching her resilience, still supported her 100%. She needs to find her own path, I could almost hear my mother saying, rationalizing Lyra's petulance as some profound journey of self-discovery. It was infuriating. My sister had just tried to harm my unborn child, and her consequence was that she got to stay home, pampered, and avoid the slight inconvenience of a missing class. Meanwhile, I was bracing for an invasion of my own home, my mother believing she had every right to dictate my living situation. But in all this madness, a quiet strength was growing within me. A fierce resolve. I was going to create my own family, a loving, healthy one, completely separate from this nonsense. I was going to be the mother I never truly had. I was going to create a bond with my daughter where she never felt like a burden, where she knew she was cherished, where she was empowered to control her own life, not just react to the chaos of others. I wanted her to feel secure, loved, and absolutely, unconditionally safe. Something I hadn't felt in years, if ever, in my own childhood home. This baby girl, my little fighter, was my chance at a new beginning. She was my hope. And I knew, with every fiber of my being, that I would protect her from the kind of toxicity that had poisoned my own life. I would break the cycle. I had to. But the road ahead, it still felt daunting. The thought of my mother moving in, even temporarily, was a dark cloud hanging over me. The constant pressure, the inevitable arguments, the emotional drain. I knew I would need every ounce of strength I had, and then some, to get through the next few months with my sanity intact. I'm doing everything I can to keep calm for my daughter, but some days, it feels like I'm barely treading water. What will happen when my mother finally moves in? Will I be able to keep my distance, maintain my boundaries? Or will the tension escalate, threatening to shatter what little peace I have left? The doorbell rang, a sharp, insistent sound that shattered the fragile quiet of my apartment. It was a sound I'd dreaded for weeks, a summons to the next chapter of chaos. My mother, along with my youngest sister, Alara, stood on my doorstep, suitcases piled high, faces alight with an unsettling mix of entitlement and expectation. There was no "can we come in?" or "is this a good time?" Just a sweeping gesture towards the hallway, as if to say, "We're here. The show begins." They hadn't arrived early, they hadn't arrived late. They'd arrived precisely when they said they would, a small point of punctuality that somehow made their invasion even more jarring. My little two-bedroom apartment, usually a haven of calm, suddenly felt impossibly small, suffocating. Every corner, every surface seemed to shrink under the weight of their belongings, their presence, their overwhelming energy. Alara, bless her heart, was just a kid. She was sweet, mostly, and certainly not the whirlwind of destruction that Lyra was. But she was still a child, used to the expansive space of their house back in the other state, and the sudden confinement clearly unsettled her. She darted from room to room, a restless energy, asking where she could put her things, where she would sleep. My mother, meanwhile, took command of the living room, directing the placement of bags, immediately critiquing the furniture arrangement, and then, without missing a beat, started unpacking a box of her own essential kitchenware. "Well, this is cozy," she declared, looking around with a critical eye, as if she were doing me a favor by gracing my humble abode with her presence. "But don't worry, honey. Once I find a house, we'll have so much more space. It'll be just like old times, only better. Just like old times." The words hung in the air, a threat rather than a promise. My stomach clenched, a familiar knot of dread tightening. I hadn't lived with my mother in 7 years. 7 years of building my own routines, my own peace, my own life. And now, in the most vulnerable period of my life, pregnant and trying to protect my unborn daughter, that hard-won independence was being systematically dismantled, piece by piece. The first few days were a blur of polite fictions and seething resentment. My mother had an uncanny ability to make herself the center of every space, every conversation. She'd wake up early, bustling around the kitchen, clanging pots and pans, making coffee, but always her way, never mine. She'd rearrange my pantry, optimizing it. She'd comment on my clothes, my diet, my plans for the day. Nothing was too small for her opinion, nothing too personal for her interference. Are you sure you should be having that, darling? It's not very nutritious for the baby. Oh, are you going out again? Shouldn't you be resting more? Your apartment is a little sparse, isn't it? I'll help you pick out some proper decor once we move into a house. Every comment, a tiny barb. Every suggestion, an attempt to control. My boundaries, once solid, were dissolving like sugar in hot water. I found myself retreating, spending more time in my bedroom, making excuses to go out, to escape the suffocating presence that now filled every corner of my home. My partner, Liam, was a godsend. He'd come over after work, offering a calm presence, a listening ear, a quiet escape into our shared future. He saw what was happening, the way my mother was chipping away at me, but he knew I had to navigate it in my own way, for now. Elara, caught in the middle, mostly kept to herself. She spent a lot of time on her tablet or talking to her friends back home. Sometimes she'd look at me with a flicker of understanding in her eyes, a silent acknowledgement of the tension. But mostly, she just existed, another body in a space that was rapidly becoming too small for my sanity. The worst part was the constant, unspoken expectation of gratitude. My mother genuinely believed she was helping me, saving me from myself, preparing me for motherhood by imposing her idea of what a mother should be. And if I dared to push back, even subtly, the defensive shields would rise. "I'm your mother," she'd say, her voice hardening. "I only want what's best for you. I deserve respect." The same old refrain, a weapon she'd wielded against me my entire life. It was a stark reminder of why I'd moved out 7 years ago. The emotional manipulation, the constant criticism disguised as concern, the inability to see me as an adult capable of making my own choices. All of it flooded back, a torrent of old wounds reopening. I could feel my stress levels soaring, my anxiety spiking. I'd try to breathe, to remind myself of my little girl growing inside me, to stay calm for her. But some days, it felt like an impossible task. And then there was Lyra. Even though she was states away, her shadow loomed large. My mother would talk about her, usually in hushed, sympathetic tones. "Poor Lyra, she's so sensitive. This whole college thing has really upset her. She just needs time to find herself." Time to find herself? She'd just chosen to abandon her entire future because one class wasn't available. And my mother, instead of pushing her to adapt, to explore other options, to take responsibility, was coddling her. It was infuriating. It was the same enabling behavior that had fostered Lyra's entitlement and rage in the first place. I wanted to scream, to point out the hypocrisy, the sheer blindness of it all, but I knew it would be pointless. It would only lead to another lecture about respect, about how I didn't understand, about how I was always too harsh on my sister. I'd retreat to my room, clutching my burgeoning belly, feeling my daughter kick inside me. This was what I was fighting for. A life free from this endless cycle of drama and toxicity. A safe space for her. A home filled with unconditional love, not veiled judgments and controlling demands. My due date was approaching faster than I could comprehend, and with it, the end of my lease at the Riverstone Lofts. This was my escape route, my light at the end of the tunnel. I would move in with Liam. We had already discussed it extensively, mapped out our plans, found a beautiful, small place near the Greenleaf district that would be perfect for us and the baby. It was a secret weapon, a quiet rebellion I nurtured in my heart. My mother, of course, was completely oblivious. She was still under the delusion that I would simply fall in line, that once she secured a proper house, I would move in with her, her dutiful daughter, ready to resume my role in her carefully constructed family narrative. The thought of shattering that delusion was both terrifying and exhilarating. I knew it would unleash a storm of epic proportions. Her disappointment, her anger, her accusations of disrespect and abandonment, I could already hear them echoing in my mind. But the alternative, staying tethered to her endless drama, was unthinkable. Not anymore. Not with my daughter's well-being at stake. The days crawled by, each one a test of my patience, my resolve. My mother's presence was a constant, low-level hum of anxiety. I walked on eggshells, trying to avoid conflict, trying to maintain some semblance of peace for my baby. But the tension was palpable, a thick, suffocating blanket that settled over our small apartment. We were ticking down the clock, not just to my due date, but to the end of the lease, to my freedom. One evening, after another passive-aggressive comment about my choice of baby names, "Are you sure that's strong enough? What if she's teased?" I felt something snap inside me. I excused myself, went to my room, and just stood there, staring at my reflection in the window. My eyes looked tired, my face drawn, but beneath it all, there was a spark of fierce determination. I wasn't just existing anymore. I was preparing for battle. I knew I couldn't delay the inevitable conversation forever. My mother's house-hunting efforts were ramping up, filled with cheerful pronouncements about our future home. The longer I waited, the harder it would be to tell her I was leaving. I needed to pick my moment, brace myself for the fallout, and stand firm. For my daughter. For myself. The next few weeks were a blur of appointments, nesting, and a growing sense of urgency. My mother, oblivious to the ticking time bomb, continued to make plans for us. She even started looking at nurseries, assuming she would have free rein to decorate my daughter's room. It was all I could do to smile and nod, my teeth gritted, my heart pounding with a mixture of fear and defiance. The day of reckoning was approaching. The lease was almost up. And I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that my mother was about to face a truth she was utterly unprepared for. My escape was imminent, but the explosion that would follow, that was the next challenge I had to face. How would I tell her? What would she say when she realized I wasn't falling into her trap? And what would happen to Alara, caught in the crossfire of our fractured family? The air in our small apartment felt impossibly thick, each breath a struggle. It was a Tuesday evening, a nondescript night, and my mother was meticulously ironing a table runner she'd bought for the new house. The irony was a bitter taste in my mouth. She hummed a little tune, completely absorbed in her vision of a perfect domestic future, a future that excluded my choices entirely. I watched her for a moment, my hands resting protectively on my belly. Alara gave a gentle flutter, as if sensing the impending seismic shift. This was it. The moment I'd been dreading and yet, paradoxically, craving. "Mom," I started, my voice sounding unnaturally calm, almost detached. She paused her ironing, her gaze sharp, expectant. "We need to talk about the lease." She smiled, a knowing, condescending smile. "Oh, honey, don't worry about that. It's almost over. I've already put in a call to the leasing office about extending a little bit while I finalize the purchase on the new place. It's going to be wonderful. 3 bedrooms, a little garden for Alara to play in." I held up a hand, stopping her stream of blissful fantasy. "Mom, I'm not moving in with you." The hum died in her throat. The iron clunked onto its rest. Her face, which moments before had been soft with maternal dreams, hardened into something I knew all too well. It was the face of absolute indignation, of betrayal. "What did you just say?" Her voice was low, dangerous. "I said I'm not moving in with you," I repeated, forcing myself to meet her stare. My heart hammered against my ribs, a drumbeat of defiance. "When the lease is up, I'm moving in with Liam." Silence. A heavy, suffocating silence that pressed in on me from all sides. I could almost hear the gears turning in her mind, processing, rejecting, formulating her counterattack. Then it began. "With Liam? Liam? You're going to drag my grandchild into some temporary arrangement with a boy? What kind of security is that? He doesn't even have a proper career yet. He's just a technician at Aerodyne Solutions, not a doctor, not a lawyer." "He's a good man, Mom," I interjected, trying to keep my voice steady. "He loves me, and he's going to be a wonderful father. We found a place together, a small apartment near the Greenleaf district. It's perfect for us." "Perfect for us," she scoffed, a venomous edge to her tone. "What about family? What about Alara having a stable home, with her mother and her grandmother nearby to help? I've been planning this, you know. I've been looking at houses that would give you and the baby your own space. I've been sacrificing my time, my energy, my money for this. And this is the thanks I get? You stab me in the back." Her voice was rising now, each word a carefully aimed dart. I felt the familiar weight of guilt descend, but this time, it was different. This time, there was a shield around my heart, forged from the need to protect my daughter. "You didn't ask me, Mom," I said, my voice firmer now. "You just decided. You moved into my apartment without a discussion. You planned my life without my input. I'm an adult. I'm having a baby. I get to make my own decisions. She took a step closer, her eyes blazing. Decisions? You think this is a decision? This is rebellion. This is you turning your back on your own family, all for some temporary fling. What about your sister? What about the family unit? You think you can just abandon us all and run off with this man? The mention of my sister, the one who'd wished death upon me and Alara, was a fresh sting. This has nothing to do with Alara, Mom. This is about us, I said, pointing between her and myself. This is about me needing space, needing to build my own life without constant interference and judgment. Interference? Judgment. Her laugh was harsh, devoid of humor. I am your mother. I am trying to guide you, to help you make good choices. This is what good mothers do. You are pregnant, vulnerable. You need support, not some bachelor pad with a boy who thinks he knows everything. I closed my eyes for a brief moment, breathing through the wave of anger and frustration. This was her playbook. Attack, accuse, make me out to be the ungrateful, wayward child. But I wouldn't fall for it this time. Not with Alara kicking gently inside me, a silent reminder of what truly mattered. Mom, I'm moving in with Liam. The decision is made. I'm telling you out of respect, not to ask for permission. Her jaw tightened. Her eyes narrowed. Respect? You think this is respect? This is the ultimate disrespect. After everything I've done for you, after letting you stay here, after trying to pick up the pieces of this broken family, you just throw it all back in my face. She paced the small living room, her movements agitated, her hands gesturing wildly. And what about Alara? You think that baby needs to be brought up in that kind of instability? When she could have a beautiful home, a strong family around her. With me there to help raise her properly. Liam and I will raise her properly, I stated, my voice unwavering. We're going to create a loving, stable home. And we can do that without you dictating every single aspect of our lives. The word dictating seemed to strike a nerve. Her face flushed a deep red. Dictating? I am providing for you. I am offering you stability. You are so ungrateful. You always have been. Just like your sister always gets the blame, you always make yourself the victim, and everyone else is the villain. My blood ran cold at the familiar deflection, the immediate pivot to blaming me. This isn't about blame, Mom. This is about boundaries. And I need them. Boundaries. She practically shrieked the word. I am your mother. There are no boundaries when it comes to family. Especially when there's a baby involved. I swear, you're just like your father. Stubborn, unyielding, always thinking you know best. She knew how to hit below the belt, using every past wound as ammunition. I could feel the familiar pull, the desire to retreat, to cower, but I pushed through it. Alara needed me to be strong. I'm sorry you feel that way, I said, my voice quiet but firm. But my mind is made up. Liam and I have already signed a lease. It wasn't entirely true, we were just about to, but I needed to shut down the argument, to make it irreversible. That stopped her cold. Her eyes widened, a flicker of genuine shock momentarily eclipsing her anger. You signed a lease? Without telling me? Without consulting your family? How could you be so deceitful? So conniving? It's my life, Mom. She stared at me, her chest heaving. For a terrifying moment, I thought she might actually strike me. Her hands clenched and unclenched at her sides. Then, with a guttural cry of frustration, she spun around, marching to the fridge. She ripped down a drawing my little sister, the other one, the sweet one, had made. Not the ultrasound, thankfully, but still a jarring act of symbolic destruction. Fine, she spat, throwing the drawing onto the kitchen counter. Fine. You want to make your own mistakes? You want to choose some boy over your family, over the security I'm offering you? Then go. See how well you fare. But don't come crying to me when it all falls apart. Don't come asking for help when you realize what a terrible mistake you've made. She stormed into her bedroom, slamming the door shut with a force that rattled the thin walls. The silence that followed was deafening, but this time, it felt different. It wasn't suffocating, it was liberated. I stood there, trembling, but a strange sense of calm began to settle over me. It was done. The truth was out. The storm had broken, and I was still standing. Alara was still safe inside me. I pulled out my phone, my fingers flying across the keypad. It's done, I texted Liam. She knows. She's furious. Can you come over? His reply was immediate, on my way. You did good. We'll get through this. Liam arrived within 20 minutes, his presence a soothing balm on my frayed nerves. He just held me, letting me cry out the remaining tension, the years of unspoken grievances, the fear that had finally burst forth. We spent the rest of the evening talking, reaffirming our plans, making sure we had every detail ironed out for the move. My mother remained closeted in her room. I heard her on the phone, her voice muffled but occasionally rising in a crescendo of indignation. I knew she was calling every family member she could think of, spinning her version of events, painting me as the villain, the ungrateful child who had abandoned her in her time of need. I braced myself for the inevitable barrage of calls and texts from well-meaning but misguided relatives, urging me to reconsider, to make things right with your mother. The next few days were a chilling dance of polite avoidance. My mother would emerge from her room, her face tight, her eyes refusing to meet mine. If she spoke, it was only to Alara, cooing about my poor grandchild who won't have a proper home. It was a constant stream of passive-aggressive martyrdom, designed to chip away at my resolve. But I held firm. Liam's unwavering support was my anchor. We spent every spare moment packing. I carefully boxed up Alara's tiny clothes, the little blankets, the few small toys we'd accumulated. Each item felt like a step towards our new beginning, a defiant act of creation amidst the chaos. My mother watched me, sometimes from the doorway of her room, sometimes from the kitchen, a silent, disapproving observer. She never offered to help. She never asked. The lease was officially ending on the last day of November. We had secured the new apartment starting the 1st of December. It was a tight turnaround, and the stress was immense, especially in my advanced state of pregnancy. But the thought of our own space, our own rules, kept me going. My mother, meanwhile, continued her house hunt, now with an added frantic energy. It was as if she believed that if she found a house quickly enough, she could still somehow convince me to move in, or at least guilt-trip me into it. She'd leave flyers for beautiful, spacious homes on the kitchen counter, open to pages detailing grand nurseries, strategically placed for me to see. I just ignored them, my focus solely on the boxes, on the future I was building with Liam. My younger sister, the other one, the sweet one who was still living with us, seemed caught in the middle. She was quiet, observant. Sometimes, she'd offer a small, shy smile, a silent acknowledgement of the tension, a brief moment of connection that was often shattered by my mother's sudden appearance. I knew she understood, at least on some level, what I was doing. She too had lived under the shadow of my mother's control. The days dwindled down. Movers were booked. Liam took time off work. The reality of my departure was becoming undeniable, even to my mother. Her passive aggression began to curdle into open resentment. She would make pointed remarks about my selfishness, about how some people just throw away everything for a fleeting romance. But I was beyond caring. My focus was singular, Alara. Her well-being, her future, a life free from the emotional manipulation and toxicity that had defined my own childhood. The thought of bringing her into an environment where she would constantly be judged, where her mother would be undermined, was unbearable. One evening, just a few days before the move, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my mother. It simply read, "I hope you know what you're doing. This will be the biggest mistake of your life. And you will regret it. When Alara asks why she doesn't have a stable family, remember this." A cold dread settled in my stomach, but then a wave of resolve washed over it. No, Alara would have a stable family. She would have a loving, united home, built on trust and respect, not on control and manipulation. My family, the one I was creating with Liam, would be different. It had to be. The day of the move arrived, crisp and bright. The apartment was a chaotic mess of boxes and half-packed bags. My mother was nowhere to be seen. She had left early that morning, ostensibly to look at another house, but I knew she was avoiding the inevitable farewell. Or, more accurately, the lack thereof. Liam was a rock. He directed the movers, handled the heavy lifting, and kept me calm as I oversaw the last-minute details. My younger sister, the sweet one, quietly helped me pack a final box of toiletries. As I hugged her goodbye, she whispered, "Good luck. I think you're doing the right thing." It was a small, but powerful validation. As the last box was carried out and the apartment stood empty, echoing with the ghosts of arguments and unfulfilled expectations, I took a deep breath. It felt like the first truly free breath I'd taken in years. The air was still, quiet, but it was no longer heavy with my mother's presence. It was simply mine and Alara's. We drove to the new apartment, a small, cozy space that felt infinitely larger than the two-bedroom I'd just left. It was ours. A blank canvas for our new life. The nursery was small but perfectly formed, a haven of soft colors and gentle light. But the escape, I knew, was only the first battle one. The war for true independence, for the right to build my own family free from her shadow, was far from over. My phone buzzed with another message, this time from my aunt, full of thinly veiled accusations and pleas for me to reconcile. The family drama was already spiraling, just as I'd predicted. And I knew, with a sinking certainty, that my mother would not give up. Not easily. She would continue to try and exert her control, to remind me of her sacrifices, to pull me back into her orbit. And the biggest challenge of all would be to keep her at bay, to protect my daughter from the very toxicity I had just escaped. The true fight was just beginning. Would I be strong enough to maintain these boundaries? Would Liam and I be able to withstand the pressure? And what new tactics would my mother employ to try and regain her hold over me and my burgeoning family?